Yeah, that would be helpful. Let's open some doors and let's move on. We're running an hour behind schedule. I apologize. We're going to move on to our last item. Commissioners, stay focused, please. Mount Vernon Place. David? Mount Vernon Place, a Baltimore City landmark. Mount Vernon Historic District plan to construct streetscape sidewalks, lighting, handicap access corners adjacent to buildings facing the squares. Plan does not include squares at this time. Note, Fred Shokin, staff presenter, David Nafisi. Am I getting that pretty close? Oh, good. Engineer and applicant for the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. Mr. Shokin?
Okay, this is a streetscape project in the Mount Vernon area. Let me show the slides first, and then I'll go to the boards on the front. And also, we have representatives, both Mr. Nafisi plus Margaret Martin, who's the head of the design, traffic engineering and construction section division of the Department of Transportation. The Mount Vernon Streetscape project is really another phase of a sort of a continuing project around Mount Vernon Place. This aerial view is showing what has been seen in the past and what's been done, as well as what's being proposed or was proposed initially. The dashed lines are showing areas that the streetscape project treatment has already been done, and that's on the south side of the East Square in front of the Peabody Institute, on Center Street, both from Cathedral to St. Paul, excluding the south side of the block where the Peabody is, and on the side of the South Square and Walters, both the old building and the addition, and coming up halfway along the block on Cathedral. So all of that was shown to the Commission in the past and was approved. This project is basically continuing that treatment on the side of the Peabody and along Center Street, as well as on both sides, the north and the south side of the West Square, and continuing the treatment on Cathedral. The initial project was also going to affect the sidewalk that's in front of the squares, and that has been excluded from the project, both at the staff recommendation and the community, because what's going to happen with the parks is much broader than this. There's the balustrades and whatever, and was decided that really should await or be deferred until the parks are treated. And this had come up before the Commission in the past on the treatment for the North Park, and having just dealing with the sidewalks without dealing with the entire park didn't make much sense. So basically, that is what the project entails. As far as what we deal with in the streetscape project, a lot of it deals with the sidewalks, and this is part of the streetscape project in front of the Peabody that has been completed. So instead of having concrete sidewalks, there would be these tile sidewalks, and this was completed and approved by the Commission, so this treatment would be done for those other blocks, as I stated earlier. At the corners, there will be handicapped accessible ramps and different kind of treatment. These truncated domes that meet ADA standards will be done on the corners at all the street corners within those block faces. The tree wells will be treated this way, where there is a stone around here which does let water in a much broader area for the trees. Also, I'm not going to get into the total details, but I think I had the figure There are 19 new trees will be planted as part of this project, 12 of the existing trees to remain, and it is documented in the plans which ones apply. But for all the tree wells, the treatment will be as seen on this slide. Just one example, this is the current condition of the sidewalks. The sidewalks that are concrete will be treated in this manner. If the sidewalk is of another material or historic material, such as brick or slate, that will be retained. So this is currently what's there on one side, and you can see the tree wells as they currently exist. And they'll be treated as was shown earlier on what's been previously done. Just to show some of what will be retained, this is the brick tile sidewalk in front of the Walters Mansion. That will be kept as is. It will only be the concrete sidewalks that will be treated. Again, here's another brick sidewalk that will be retained. Only the concrete sidewalks will have that new treatment. This is the slate sidewalk in front of the Engineers Club. The plans show that this one concrete block will be replaced with bluestone, and actually, outside of the scope of this project, has already been done. But so that was treated with a new sidewalk, but it's included in this project, but that actually was completed last week between the time I took this picture and today.
So the slate's going to stay?
The slate stays, and yes, the slate will not be touched, and a bluestone has been replaced, that concrete, so it matches as closely as possible to the slate. The plans do show in one case pretty close to that. Actually, this is the same sidewalk near there. There's currently a sort of marble stepping stone that the plans show will be retained. Although in reviewing the plans, I noticed on the Cathedral Street side, there's another stepping stone which is hitching post, which wasn't identified. So part of our recommendation is, and has been agreed with transportation, is that this will be also retained as something that wasn't included in the original survey. The other, I guess, issue is, as far as curb treatment is, if there is an existing granite curb, that granite curb will be retained and reset. However, if the curb is concrete, it will be replaced with concrete. One thing that we're recommending, and I can show it, there are certain cases where you have granite curb, then another section of concrete, and another section of granite. And what we're recommending is that if it's possible to find salvage pieces of granite, which we believe exist, and they can fit in there, can they put in some salvage pieces of granite rather than just replace it with concrete? Before I go to the recommendations, let me just show the plan up front, and I'll continue that. And just the plans that were provided, that were sent, and they're a little bit complicated, but again, just to show what we're dealing with, and I tried to lay this out as they are. So this is the West Square, so it's both sides of the West Square, and continuing down to Cathedral Street. So the portions here, those are the existing historic sidewalk materials, whether slate or brick or whatever, those will be retained. So we're only talking about the new treatment here in front of the Gladding House, here the building next to the Engineer Society, and coming around the corner here. And those hitching posts I talked about were here. So this shows the location of the new street, the tree wells, and so on. And the same thing here in front of the Washington Place apartments. We'll get the treatment. This is the existing probably brick walkway in front of the Mount Vernon Club, which will be retained. The new treatment here to the Severn. And just to show the example, this 36 section has granite. This 30-foot section has granite. So instead of putting concrete between the two, we're trying to say if we can find that much granite that exists and whatever, and the match, it didn't make sense. I know there are other parts on Charles Street where they put in new granite, but the new granite is so much bigger and wider that if they're trying to retain the historic materials, it may make sense to salvage material. And the other section that's being considered, this is the Washington Place side, and continuing around to Center Street. The same case here, where here is pretty much the new treatment here. The corner's already been done. This little section has already been done because it's where that new entrance is into the Peabody. And there have been a few sections on Center Street that have already been done, or in cases where there's a vault or something where you can't put that new sidewalk treatment, the concrete is retained. And this is just the detail showing the trees and the indicating what trees remain, what will be replaced. I should also add that the plans that were presented were the original ones, so, and again, we're deferring the streetscape treatment on the parks because the parks should be treated differently and hopefully will be resolved at a later date. Again, to retain the hitching post and stepping stone that wasn't included in the survey initially. And second recommendation is to explore salvaged granite curbing where visible. Let me just make sure that pretty much I covered what was there. I should also add there is an issue that transportation probably handle better than us dealing with electrical hand boxes. In dealing with, which I really haven't covered very much because, I mean, our concern really is primarily with the physical appearance of these things and the electric boxes. I should also add, the only other thing that the plans do involve is involving the resurfacing of the street along Washington Place, but does not involve dealing with the cobblestone around the monument. I do also have, and I think the last sheet in your packet is the comments from the Mount Vernon Architectural Review Committee, where basically, I guess they primarily don't have an issue with some of the things. They do state about investigating salvage granite curbstones. And a lot of the other things dealt with other things about electrical conduit, infrastructure, and the sidewalks, which I think transportation can handle better than we can. The initial plan, we're talking also about bollards because the bollards were going to be near the balustrades in the interior of the parks. But since we're not including that, balustrades really aren't part of this, or bollards aren't really part of this at this time. They also were concerned, can monies be spent to apply to fixing up the ends of the parks? I mean, if we're reducing the scope of this, they don't want to see the money go away, and they hope that more can be done here. There were some questions about the crosswalks and reflective striping and so on, which probably is more of a transportation issue than an aesthetic issue. We usually don't get involved with that matter. Also had an item about bollards, adding some bollards, but into that park, the South Park area, which really isn't being covered with this, just to protect the balustrade, which was apparently struck by a car that went straight and didn't curve. So basically, I guess the staff recommendation is considering this sort of revised scope is approving the, as I said before, the paving, the street trees, the handicap ramps, and with the exceptions of including some of the things that were not included initially. And with that, I'll have the.
Could you go back to the drawing?
Okay.
So I understand. I'd like you to sort of just follow along the curve and say, when are we going to have granite and when are we going to have concrete under the current plan?
Basically, it is wherever granite currently exists, it will be retained.
I know, but I'd like to have a feel for how much.
Concrete is in there. As far as the north part of the block, in front of the Washington Place apartments, there is a granite curb. new treatment is done on the section.
Existing or new?
It's existing, basically they reset the existing granite.
Well, I guess,
Basically, they take up the granite and they level it off and they put in a new sidewalk.
Well, let Mr. Murphy finish. You want to finish on that line?
I feel like I've done everything I should about this, but I know how on the sections of Charles Street, south of Center Street, which I guess was done to another palette, right? The granite curbing is very handsome. I think, and it's such a good investment, I think. It's gonna last so much longer than that concrete curbing. And if there were any place I'd like to see as much granite curbing as possible, it would be around these four squares in the Vernon place. So I would look for every opportunity, if possible, if you're gonna do the work. And you know, you can get a granite curb any size you want. I mean, you don't have to rely on the big ones like they have on south of the square. Or you can get recycled, that's fine too, but I would just urge that, you know, if you're gonna replace a curb, replace it in granite.
Thank you. Mr. Cusack?
Just
think
to
there's
illustrate it, I mean, here's the case where you can see there is the granite curbing, and here, as I said before, in front of the Engineer Society, the slate just sort of stops, and that's what's there.
Rather than build new
Yeah.
curbs. No, go ahead.
I think there's a salvage area over by Edison Highway and Monument Street, and I think there's some granite curbs stored there.
Yeah, I believe the city, it may be under transportation itself, that does have some, I guess the question, and I'll leave that to the transportation people, is there enough to salvage and
Looks like a lot.
to you know,
Other questions for Mr. Shokin before we proceed to transportation? Ms. Higgins?
I think there's also some salvage stored over somewhere in Druid Park, maybe behind the zoo. I've heard there's a lot of old marble and granite over there. But I concur with Mr. Murphy. I think it's crucial in that very place to have a consistency.
Okay, Mr. Can?
There were some questions raised, and I don't know whether Mr. Shokin can answer them or someone else can, about electrical conduit infrastructure questions for events and crosswalk information and striping and that kind of thing. Are those being addressed now, later? Seems to me that they're all part of the overall effort to when we replace the sidewalks and all that.
to be honest, I would defer those questions to transportation because I really didn't know enough
Okay.
about how those electrical conduits are handled.
Are the existing lights all staying?
Yes, the existing light, they are, the historic light fixtures, which, well, seen here, have already been installed. I believe the plans do show one light fixture is going to be moved, I think, on the side of the Peabody, 10 or some feet or whatever. I think dealing with a tree well or something to do with that. But basically, it's retaining the existing light fixtures. I guess I should also add that most of the plan, which does involve the squares themselves, do have the sort of historic reproduction Victorian lighting. On the Cathedral Street side, and I think that was one issue that the community did raise, just has the regular, I guess, aluminum arc lights, but that, I believe, would be retained, or they would just be the same aluminum ones and not the historic ones. Basically, the historic ones have just been installed in selected locations.
When you say historic, when do they truly date from? Are they
I'm sorry,
recreations?
actually reproduction historic.
Reproductions.
These are not historic
And do you know
fixtures
when they were
themselves.
installed? 1980s, I'm hearing from Ms.
yeah,
Katarman.
or
Okay, and then in
maybe
terms of
later.
tree replacement, what is the criteria for that?
I'll again defer with transportation, but basically it's the idea that, well, some of the trees, I guess, the conditions of them, if the tree was large and substantial, it's retained, and but in all cases, they're increasing the size of the tree wells in order to, have more, allow it to get more rainwater on it. I guess in cases where new trees and the locations are indicated on the plan, but I didn't specifically go that this tree or that tree was
Okay.
going to be retained, but
And in terms of the tree wells, the ones in front of the Peabody are mounded with like a pressure-treated sort of liner, really, to, I guess, separate the dirt from the cobblestone, which I wasn't too enthralled with. But the ones
No,
you're
they're-
saying will be on this plan are the ones that are on Cathedral Street, which is that.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Shokin? All right, Mr. Nafisi, do you have anything to add to this? Or
Miss Martin.
Miss Martin, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I'm helping David here,
Good.
only because
Looks
the
like he needs
project's
some
been
help.
around for so long, and yesterday we met with Mr. Warren to go over some of the details and concerns, and walked the site. I think it's a beautiful area, and I think Fred did a great presentation on what we plan on doing. We are taking the recommendation of the staff to reduce the caps out of the squares to allow when the entire square is done, that it all be addressed all at once. And our focus is on the sidewalk areas, just as you explained. In terms of the electrical conduit, those are for all the festivities that we have in the area, and I guess everybody's tired of wiring the city for each festivity every time we put it up there. It does look pretty bad. So we've structured underground conduits in the roadways themselves, so that all the vendors have to do is plug into the handhelds. And the reason we have the design that we do with the temporary backup generators when the events are occurring is because the electrical matrix through there is completely full. Capacity is taxed out, and so this is our solution for our temporary events in the area. Other questions? I think it's a good one in terms of seeing what we can do and finding other granite curbs where we can. I think that's a wonderful exercise. We just cost money, and but we can look into that. And what else am I missing? Crosswalks. What is the issue on the crosswalks?
The question was raised by the community, options for crosswalks other than reflective striping, possibly to modification of the angle of north-south crosswalks at Charles and Madison.
I think what happens at Charles and Madison, because you have the street is wide where the squares are, and then it narrows in. The crosswalks sort of come at a diagonal, instead of being sort of straight. Which I guess from a transportation point of view is the crosswalks lead from one of the handicap ramps to the other one.
Right.
And they were on a diagonal.
Right, we have some design parameters we have to meet.
From that, but I guess the other issue was, and it's really outside the scope of this, I guess, is that some places, instead of putting in a, I guess, reflective,
Thermoplastic tape. You can say it, Fred.
thermoplastic crosswalk, to put in other materials, and the stone, I know we talked elsewhere about asphalt something, or Pratt Street, something along those lines, which I don't think was, at least doesn't show up in this plan. I'm not sure how they're, doing it in Charles Street.
No, we're just using the thermoplastic tape for the crosswalks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Martin? Ms. Higgins?
There was mention made of the surfacing material of the street along Washington Place. We have the asphalt, the glass fault at present. Is that going to be continued or what?
Well, I would love to see glass fault continued. That section is part of the project, and right now we haven't spec'd out that glass fault. I'm been here recently, and I'm just finding out the history of glass fault. At this juncture, we will investigate whether or not we can replace it in kind, but it has a interesting history in terms of there's not real specifications. It's more of an art than it is a science. And as much as we would love to see it here, it may not happen again right here, but what we would like to do is have it like in all of our art districts because it's so fun. But the short answer is we're not going to be able to do it for repaving on this particular site.
That's definite.
Well, it's not definite, but yes, that is what it's moving forward. If I can move fast enough over the next 6 months to guarantee a reliable source of glass fault, we will do everything possible because it's a wonderful, aspect of the road section. I just don't know if we can do that. I think the last time, when was it put in? Like 20 years ago, or
At least.
at least 20 years ago. And so I have to find out if the alchemists are still together who can come up with that mix.
It's been very popular.
Just a
Mr. Murphy.
suggestion, I think it was used not too many years ago at the Montgomery Park project, Himmel Ridge.
Where?
Montgomery Park, the old Montgomery Ward's
Yeah.
facility over in,
What, their parking lot?
yeah. So,
If we can reuse it, we're going to reuse it.
It's been very popular, and it does give a certain luster at night. That I
It's
think
like
is-
diamonds in the
Yeah,
rough.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have 3 people signed up to testify. Please limit your testimony to 3 minutes. Mr. Warren?
Thank you. Paul Warren with the Mount Vernon Belvedere Association. I can't possibly address the issues with this plan in 3 minutes, so we'll address what we can. The electrical issues, someone asked if that had been addressed, that had not even been presented to the community. The only architecture review comment was it needed to be addressed. The fact that the electrical is there, and more importantly that it's terminating in temporary generators, is something that we should all look at and find better opportunities. Keep in mind, this is a 5-year-old plan, and since then, for example, Seton Hill has a wonderful power station coming in with huge conduits coming my direction towards the park out of that. There may be opportunities there that weren't there 5 years ago. To keep within my 3 minutes, our primary request is for a continuance of this discussion. We believe there are major opportunities that are being lost here. Context is not being taken into account. Major segments that are not being addressed. For example, both sides of the sidewalk flanking the North Park are not in this plan. You've heard that the end caps of the parks are not being addressed in this plan. That's that's happened since 4 p.m. yesterday. So there are changes that need to be looked at carefully. What are the trade-offs? That we encourage. That was a recommendation, and at risk of going overtime, I have to thank the Department of Transportation and the people there. They have been the most responsive, I think, of any people in the city I've ever worked with. They've known about that there were issues with the community for a grand total of, I think, 3 or 4 days, and they've already met with us on that. That in part stems from the fact that this was not presented to Architecture Review Committee by the applicants, but by a Chap staff member, which I believe is perhaps a flawed model. It certainly doesn't allow the communications that the applicant would deserve and the feedback that they would deserve in this process. So again, and for many reasons that I'm not going to have time to list, I would request a continuance of this. I have a letter likewise from the Friends of Mount Vernon Place president stating that they've not been involved in the process. They have a number of issues that they're listing, and would like that, if not read into the record, certainly considered carefully by Jane McConnell, who was here but had to leave for another commitment. Wish we had more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a copy of Ms. McConnell's letter? Could you bring that and give it to Ms. Katarba, please? Mr. Warren, can you summarize what her issues are?
In addition to, her primary request is to ask for a delay. In summary, in addition to the process issue of over the 5 years not being involved in the process, certainly the Friends ought to be involved. And she states her first notification was the Mount Vernon Belvedere Architecture Review Committee notifying her just several weeks ago, about their review and presentation by a Chap staff member. Other than that, they would not have been aware of the matter before you today. The number of items are, again, the conduit, the areas, the generators, the context between the outer sidewalks and the inner parks, and that there needs to be a comprehensive plan so that we look at that context. We should, I would paraphrase and say we should ask the city to do at least what we're asking the Otterbein applicant to do and give us the context. How is this all coming together? We're missing big pieces here. I think there are good opportunities to trade this off. This probably can be done. Our experience with transportation is a great group to work with. We can probably work through these issues in a month. I just don't think this issue is ready for review either. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you here representing the Architectural Review Committee?
Yeah,
and
yes, they are not here today. I'm the
Okay.
Vice President of Mount Vernon Belvedere Association, so I'm clarifying a couple of comments there and asking for that continuance.
Mr. Humphreys, Dr. Humphreys?
Hi, good afternoon. Is it good evening yet? Or it's pretty close, yes. I'm Lance Humphreys. Kathleen, are you not going to read Jane McConnell's letter or into the record, or?
Mr. Warren to summarize it,
Okay.
and please state your affiliation.
Yes, I'm with the Mount Vernon Belvedere Association as well.
And what is
Property
your position, and why are two of you testifying on their behalf?
I'm testifying as part of property stewardship today, and also because of my involvement with the Mount Vernon Place Conservancy that we're trying to get off the ground here this fall.
So are you representing them as well?
I'm not representing them. I would say I'm a part of that process.
Okay, we'll try to limit your testimony on behalf of them, welcome, but anything Mount Vernon Belvedere, try to not repeat what Mr. Warren has already told us.
Right. Well, I'm going to read, because it hasn't been read into the record. This is from Jane McConnell's letter, and obviously the Friends of Mount Vernon Place is involved with the Conservancy. She said there are a number of items on the plan that we need clarification about before we can proceed. Also, for your information, the Friends of Mount Vernon Place is working closely with the MVBA and with the city to follow what other cities are doing by setting up a Mount Vernon Place Parks Conservancy. This would be a public-private partnership wherein the parks are managed by the Conservancy, and a capital campaign initiated to raise funds to restore these historic parks. Obviously, in this context, a rehabilitation plan would be developed for the parks, which would be included plans for lighting, irrigation, the restoration of the balustrades, which, for instance, in the West Park are in danger of tipping. So in light of that comment that is in Jane's letter, the thing that I want to observe today is that 4 or 5 years ago, the Department of Recreation and Parks came before the Chap Commission with a plan for inside the parks that didn't address anything on the outside. And today we have a large part of a plan that addresses just what's on the outside without considering what's on the inside. And I think that we need to at least talk about that for a couple months to really think about how we're going to get people from the outside into the parks, because that was one of the reasons why the Chap commissioners decided to deny Rec and Parks plan for their accessibility plan, because it wasn't probably the best plan. And I think that we need to know what's happening on the outside and the inside at the same time in order to be able to think about these issues of how to get people into the parks, but also how to get the water and plumbing that we need into the water, plumbing, and electrics into the parks, which we're going to need for new fountain heads and all this kind of work. And currently, we don't have a good idea of where any of those things travel underneath this proposed current work. So I think that that's just, as Paul was saying, that's a big opportunity that we need to talk about. You know, it's not a year, but we need to talk about it before we approve a plan that would perhaps have to be partially undone in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Can?
I have a question, question for you. Notwithstanding the commentary about the park themselves, do you have any additional commentary on what's being proposed specifically?
I think the plan in general that for the outside is good. The one thing I didn't mention is the whole idea of this granite curbing, and below Center Street we have granite curb cuts, and that I think we should be able to have granite curb cuts in Mount Vernon Place if we have them below Center Street. And unfortunately, the one was already done in front of the Peabody at the corner, but there's no reason going forward why a higher standard could not be applied to the project. And I think it's important that any of these curb cuts are designed so that they get people to the part of the park that we are going to make accessible to, you know, to all, and but for ADA especially.
Okay, thank you. So to remind folks as to the I guess the Google bird's eye view that was part of your staff report, what has been completed and what has not been completed relevant to the discussion in terms of relation to the park. All right, any other questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry. I had Ms. McConnell, but I understand she's departed. Mr. Mason, would you like an opportunity to testify? Please introduce yourself and your affiliation. Left.
Good evening. I'm Malcolm Mason. I'm a National Historic Landmark Steward. My specific responsibility is for Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon is really three landmarks, national historical landmarks together. The Washington Monument in the center, which has a marvelous history. It's the tallest commemorative column in the world, and et cetera. I can go on. I won't. This is set in a set of parkettes which were designed by Hastings and Carrere, and they are of historic value. The whole Mount Vernon area is an national historic landmark. So we have a jewel within a jewel within a jewel. Why in blazes would anyone consider not using granite curbs all the way around that park? That's our most valuable monument in the city. Now, as a member of the Architectural Review Committee, I guess I'm Chairman Emeritus. Seem to have been there forever. I am not sure whether we were hoodwinked, deceived, or there was misrepresentation. But the presentation was made to us by Mr. Fred Shokin instead of someone from the interested party, which is transportation. Why this is, I don't know. Mr. Shokin could not speak properly to all of our concerns. The fallout that has occurred recently shows that what Mr. Shokin presented to us is not what is intended by transportation. I would request that this matter be deferred for at least a month for further study and a presentation of proper presentation made to our Architectural Review Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shokin, would you like to respond, one, why you presented as opposed to transportation, and any other issue that you might want to respond to from Mr. Mason?
It was just a matter of, I guess, of timing and getting there, and then just, I mean, it would have been, it was just a matter of timing and setting up the meeting and trying to get this done because, to be honest, when we first got the plans, there was a little bit of delay in responding to them, primarily because it was trying to understand exactly what was being, what we had seen before and what was new, because part of this has been presented previously, and I think that's one of the issues with this project, as I said before. I mean, this is in some ways a 5-year-old project that has been adapted, and parts of it were deferred, parts were seen before. And some of the delay was just doing it. Finally, it was like we needed time. We had to get on the agenda to try to get this moving. So that was pretty much it. I mean, I presented what was shown here. We, at a very early stage, both after speaking internally as well as at the meeting, the comments that I was getting and both the internal discussion, I guess, with Kathleen and what had happened in the past was not to include the parks in it. And the feeling is that this is not the last of these. I don't believe that this is the end of the streetscape treatment for Mount Vernon Place. To be honest, it may be better, or to, I mean, not have done this piecemeal, but have done this all at one time in conjunction with the restoration of the parks. However, that has been delayed and changed. Not something that we've wanted to do, but I guess that's the whole question. The plan as being presented is not all that different from the treatments as, again, on the cover sheet of your proposal of what has been treated before. We see this more as a continuation of doing that. As far as how the parks themselves should be treated, that's one of the reasons why we deferred not including the end caps or whatever in this plan, because it didn't make sense to do the sidewalk treatments over there when the balustrade needed to be redone and other things could be handled. So basically, that was the purpose of this, and in some ways, I see this as scaling down the project so that we can have something that's manageable in this phase. Clearly, I think if it was up to us in transportation, there will be another phase of this that would clearly deal with the north parks, or the both sides of the north park and the one side of the east park that hasn't been dealt with, and whether it's transportation's responsibility or rec and parks or this new conservancy treatment. I mean, clearly, I don't know what figures people have passed around, $5 million or more could be done within the parks themselves. And part of the idea of deferring some of this is so that that could be handled appropriately. But I don't think, I guess the issue here is trying to complete the sidewalk treatment, which may in part face the park, but doesn't really impact directly on any future plan that could be done within the park.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else here to testify? Mr. Mason, we've heard from you. Mr. Warren, heard from you as well. All right, any further discussion?
A question which is not clear. The drawings we're looking at are 18 months old. What is the status of those drawings as to completion, and what is the status of the funding related to the project?
Kathleen, do you know the answer to that?
I'd like to invite Ms. Martin to speak to that. We are aware of the fact that projects generally, city projects generally, of this scale take some time, and they are scheduled in certain capital budget cycles. Transportation Department, Recreation and Parks, all of the big agencies have big projects that are not all funded entirely in a single year. And this is a phased project. This does go back a number of years, and drawings are done often in advance of the actual implementation of the project. And I would like to, at some point, I would like to hear from the community and really from all of us, if we don't have the $5 million or the $8 million, we've heard different figures, to do everything that all of us would like to do, when is it that you would like to have the sidewalk piece completed? So I'd like to return to that, but I think Ms. Martin
I think
could speak
that
to the timeframes.
that nice Google map that Fred had that showed what was already done and what's being proposed now. I mean, it clearly lends itself to a phased construction, and that's what we're looking at here. We're at what's called 90% drawings right now, and so we're a step away from finalizing it and going to bid, and it's our intent to be at construction this summer so that we can have a clean area for what we have, and it's a step. It's a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Mr. Cusack?
Well, it doesn't preclude a comprehensive master plan. It doesn't have to be funded all at one time, but you don't want to set granite curbs and then have to excavate them because of something in the future. So, I mean, this is not an ideal world we live in, but ideally, the obvious smart thing to do is to have a comprehensive master plan.
Ms. Katarba? And then we got to move along on this,
This
please.
phase is part of the comprehensive master plan for streetscaping in Mount Vernon, and
Including the parks.
the park, now, physically, it's the same place, but there are several agencies that are involved. So it makes sense to do this comprehensively. However, the streetscaping project is a project of Department of Transportation, and there was and is a long-range master plan for the streetscaping in Mount Vernon. It began with a block around the Maryland Historical Society, and that was the initial phase, and I want to say that was maybe 8 or 10 years ago. So that is the comprehensive plan with regard to streetscaping. Now, in that ideal world, yes, of course, this should be integrated into an excellent plan for the Mount Vernon Place parks, and it should be entirely funded.
Well, it doesn't have to be entirely funded. You can just have the plans and then budget it as you go along, but everyone's going in the same direction.
Well, we had, I guess it was within the last 2 years, we had a presentation from Recreation and Parks presented by a landscape architect, of a proposal for, I thought it was a comprehensive plan, at least it made reference to a comprehensive plan for the all 4 parks. And it was thrown out, right? There was such opposition to it by the community that we,
I don't think it was all 4 parks. That's part of it.
oh, it's part of it, I guess that's right.
It was just the
Well,
North Park.
my view of it is, if there's anything, and I've had my office on Mount Vernon Place for over 20 years, so believe me, it pains me to see it getting worse and worse shape. But if there's anything that Chap should not be a party of, it's a piecemeal modification of that historic place without some kind of an overall plan that we can all look at and say, yes, we agree, this is it, and as the city has money, it can implement it. But, I sort of feel like we're being held hostage to say, oh, well, somehow this first couple of pieces got done, and now we're ready to do a couple of more pieces, but just that we still don't know what the overall plan for the park is. And I think Chap ought to be the shoe that gets thrown into the assembly line and say, stop, don't do anything more until you've got a plan. And somebody's got to bring recreation and parks and transportation. I used to think that's what the planning department did. And maybe there could be a suggestion passed along to the planning director that this is something you ought to do. Bring these people together, come up with a comprehensive plan for the park, then we can approve it, and then everybody can go their way and implement it as the funds, and maybe even there'll be private contributions toward it.
Thank you. Ms. Higgins?
Oh, I very much concur with Mr. Murphy. I think this is sort of piecemeal, patchwork, too little, too inconsistent. The idea that there would still be a shoebox light fixture on Cathedral Street, that you have inconsistency with the curbs, the electrical questions. The electrical situation has not just been unsightly and expensive because it has to be done every time. I think it's downright dangerous. You see these huge cables looping around. They're dangerous. There just needs to be a better plan that's better thought out. And frankly, I like last one.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm hearing An echo for one, Mr. Cusack, I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess we better. All right, well, we have a staff recommendation in front of us. Ms. Martin, in terms of funding and status, have we addressed that? What will happen? What is the budget for this project?
The
What
budget
is the status
is
of that
strictly
funding?
what we've proposed here. We have no more funds than that. But I also want to step back and say this isn't piecemeal quite the way it's been presented. Is such that the template for the work, the sidewalk work, marries exactly what is already out there and is what has already been approved and is installed. So your sidewalk template is exactly what is there. So you're talking about your 4 park areas, the quadrant area sidewalk having the exact same architectural elements throughout.
Excuse me, Ms. Martin, could you bring in that overall master plan that's been approved and show it to us? Maybe it was just a matter of us not knowing about it.
I'm speaking of the sidewalks.
I'm saying that there's no overall plan. You're saying that there's been something approved, but I'm saying that it hasn't been. There is no overall master plan for the 4 public spaces on Mount Vernon Place that I know of that this commission has approved.
Ms. Katarva?
I think we're talking about 2 different things, and what we're hearing today from the commission, and Commissioner Murphy's made a very good point, is that we are horribly lacking in having a comprehensive plan for the 4 squares. The other plan that was, and some of this is so long ago, I can't recall the exact details of it, but there was a master plan for streetscaping throughout Mount Vernon that began with the block around the Maryland Historical Society with the intention that the same template would be followed in adjacent blocks in the Mount Vernon area. And as I recall, all the property owners and the Mount Vernon Cultural District and Mount Vernon Belvedere Association, a number of organizations were all involved in that. And Chap was involved in reviewing that, and we've reviewed 2 previous phases of that. But the property owners and the organizations in the neighborhood working with the city agreed on a master plan for streetscaping. So that is the plan that the Transportation Department has been working from for probably almost a decade. So it's two different plans.
Would you agree that this plan for streetscaping should be coordinated with the plan for the parks? See, I have a different view. I don't view this sidewalk as not in the park. You see, I think that the park goes from building face to building face, and it includes the street. I don't say it's just this part in the middle of the street.
I would agree, but does that mean that this commission today would want to alter in some way a plan that has been in place and has a lot of community buy-in, property owner buy-in, that goes back a number of years? So if that's the decision, then we should get the word out that.
Show me the plan. Show me the comprehensive plan.
All right,
and
all right.
Okay.
Let's, we're splitting it. Mr. Cusack?
But we're not suggesting any change in the streetscape plan. We're just suggesting that the streetscape plan should be integrated into the whole plan. I think the
Yes.
streetscape plan is pretty clear, and it's to be
Yes.
consistent with the rest of Charles Street, which would be great.
Yes.
But
That makes perfect sense.
why we don't integrate that plan into the parks is the issue that I'm concerned about, and I think Mike and probably all of us are concerned about.
So do we put this current plan that's before you today on hold?
I
Is
would
that the question, or-
suggest
I'm
the
not talking about putting it on hold. I'm talking about not approving it.
okay. And let me,
I'm talking about putting it on hold.
right, let's, come on, it's getting late. Let's, Buzz, actually, I mean, we're all sort of on the same page. Everybody, we all recognize the importance of Mount Vernon and the park and its 3 levels of national significance. and more. This has been a streetscaping plan that's been underway for 5 years or whatever. We have previously approved pieces of that. I'm sensitive to the fact that in some ways, if we don't address the proposal that's in front of us, we exaggerate the piecemeal aspect of this that people are concerned with. So one thing I would suggest would be on this bird's eye view, which everyone has in front of them, Mike, in particular you, looking at the white streaks are the current project that's before us. We've already eliminated the 4 short north-south bars at the end of each of the parks, correct? Taking that out with everyone's consensus, as well as the other 2 short bars north and south of the monument as well, which leaves the 1 bar north of the West Park in front of the Mount Vernon Club as sort of the anomaly or whatever that I think. The other lines are really completing the blocks that the dotted lines underway, either complementing them in regard to the backside of the Peabody block along Center Street, or completing something like one that's already wrapped around the Walters and going up Cathedral Street. So one thing to be considered is knock out that one leg, and in my view, kind of complete that piece of it, and then ask that the leg in front of the Mount Vernon Club, and then ask for this comprehensive look that you all.
And the leg in front of the engineering center too?
By knocking it out, you mean go ahead and complete it, do it?
No, I mean eliminate that from what's in front of us and consider approving those other pieces.
Knock out this, not include this.
Correct. Because I think we all share the comprehensive master planning, whatever, and really, I mean, I think Buzz and Kathleen were actually saying about the same thing in terms of, you're saying the streetscaping and kind of completing, and that you generally like what we're looking at. It's just, looking at it in terms of the comprehensive.
I don't have any notion that you'd use any of the same treatment in the squares themselves.
Okay. Well, that's my 2 cents worth. Mr. Can?
Yeah.
I want to take action on this, yay or nay, and move on. Mr. Merrill looks like he needs to leave, and we're going to have a quorum issue, and we need to get people
The other
home.
component of this discussion is the ability to get what we want where we want it, meaning that if we reduce the scope of the project and we can work through the details of it, that we can get granite curbs as part of this project. I mean, there are ways to sort of explore how the funds are best used and do resolve the things that the squares are worth having done right the first time here.
Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion?
I like Michael's suggestion, give it to the planning department and give them like a couple of months to figure this out. I mean, it doesn't have to take years. I don't know why all this stuff takes so long. It's not that complicated.
Okay. Well, I think we've covered the points. I'm looking for a motion we have a proposal in front of us and a staff recommendation. We've heard our testimony. Is there a motion then from the commission? Mr. Murphy?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that the commission withhold approval of this project at this time, and to request the applicant to get together with the Department of Parks and Recreation and the Planning Department, and to return to Chap with a comprehensive plan for the proposed treatment of all the paved surfaces around the 4 parks of Mount Vernon.
And in, around and in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Inside the
Okay.
block as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second?
I would second
I'll
that.
second.
Any further discussion? Seconded by Mr. Cusack. Any further discussion? Mr. Can?
I don't disagree with that at all, but I think one could do, in my opinion anyway, do both in a sense that certain parts of this could be approved so that at least the project can move forward. And I would also add that even if we were to agree to approve part of it, that the community and the various parties that have been come forth around this be part of whatever comprehensive discussions take place with planning and transportation and rec and parks. I mean, it'd really be a comprehensive review of everything, so it comes back to us as something that's been pretty well vetted in every direction.
Okay, so you're suggesting that maybe there are pieces that we could move forward on, but suggesting if this motion goes forward, that the community be involved with the agencies that have been cited.
I'm happy to add that Donald's second suggestion as an amendment to my motion.
And would you accept that as well? Okay. Ms. Katarba?
Clarification, are there parts of this project that you wish to approve today, or is there some
Well, I
other?
don't think that
That's
part's,
not in my
in
motion.
fairness, been accepted in the motion that's on the table. That was my comment on the motion, but that's not on the table at this, as I understand it at this point.
That's
Only
correct.
the concept that parts could be approved,
No.
but at some.
That's not on the table.
Not
It's
in-
a separate
Not.
motion.
This proposal is not approved.
Okay.
Correct.
You do not accept his.
No, well, that was his. It wasn't.
One piece of it, community involvement.
I said
Yeah, I
accepted
thought you
the
did too.
second part.
I understood
The
that.
second
No.
part was when he said that the different interest groups should be part of this.
I understood. That's
Okay. I'm going to ask you just to briefly restate your motion for clarification. It looks like we might have it divided, but
I
vote.
move that we withhold approval of this proposal that's represented in these drawings. And that we request that another presentation be made to Chap that includes any improvements that are proposed by the city for the public spaces of Mount Vernon Place. By that I mean sidewalk, park, street, lighting, anything that the city intends to do in those areas. And that I suggest, I can't speak on behalf of the planning department, but I suggest that the planning department coordinate that, since it's obviously a case where one agency is going off and another one, and they're not in coordination. So I think that the planning department would be the logical body to do that coordination.
Okay.
Anyway, my motion in the simplest form is that this proposal be, not be approved, and that we would await presentation of a comprehensive plan for the public areas prior to approving.
Okay, everybody clear on that? Any further discussion? All right, I'm going to call for a vote, a roll call vote.
Now, just a minute, if you don't mind. When you previously stated the motion, I thought you said just the sidewalks in the park and around the park. Are you now referring to the grassy plots in the whole park?
I am. Yeah, I am. I think that there ought to be a plan. This is a public place, public square. And I like the way the English refer to streets and squares, that they really go from building to building. And we ought to have a plan for that, and that's my proposal.
Okay, any further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? I'm going to take a roll call vote, and I'll start on Mr. Murphy because I know where he knows what he's voting.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say yes, starting with a roll call vote. Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Opposed say no. Mr. Murphy, yes?
Yes.
Mr. Gleason?
Yes.
Mr. Cusack?
Yes.
Mr. Merrill?
Yes.
Ms. Higgins? Mr. Can?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Mr. Can?
As a second motion, just to put it to bed or not put it to bed, I would move that based on the presentation we received for the sidewalks that are on the north-south, on, I guess, Maryland Avenue side, and the remaining 2 quadrants of the Peabody block be approved as presented, subject to detailed review of specific issues that have come up with respect to the electrical and that kind of thing that we've talked about.
And how about granite curbs was the other issue raised?
And granite curbs be incorporated into each of those locations.
Okay. Now, I have a procedural question, so thank you. That seems to conflict with the other motion that's been passed unanimously. So I'm not sure, can we do that?
He's talking about outside the parks. I think he's okay.
Oh, only ones that don't actually bound the park. Thank you, I'm
And-
sorry, I missed that.
and what
Thank you,
is
Mr.
the-
Warren.
What is the forum for the detailed review?
Yeah, I would amend mine, you know, my real concern is for the 4 parks. And I don't consider, the block of Center Street between Charles Street and St. Paul Street to be part of the parks. So, I mean, I'd entertain, you know, if,
Where the corner is.
well,
Cathedral and Center.
you know, basically, for example, if it went forward, this stretch along the south side of Peabody, that would just complete this stretch of Center Street with consistent treatment, which I think would probably make a lot of sense. I wouldn't want to proceed with anything on the west Mount Vernon place.
So just that southern piece.
Okay, so then will you restate your, so
Well,
then that
I'll
we...
restate that. I mean, again, see if we can go anywhere with it. But then I would recommend, and I don't think it's inconsistent with the intent of the previous motion.
Doesn't seem-
That the portion, I guess the southern portion of the block, of the Peabody block be completed, and that the small remaining portion of the western part of the Engineers Club block be completed as proposed.
Question?
Okay, and do you want to add anything specific in terms of the use of granite, I guess is the thing that I keep, no,
Yes.
yes,
I
okay.
mean, we should add that in, I'm sorry. I forgot.
To require
It's late.
granite be used along
Require the
those
granite
sections.
curb sets be used to match the existing proportions.
Okay, so we have a motion, thank you. Ms. Katarba?
A clarification, on the drawing, we're talking about the Center Street piece?
Yes.
Are we talking
No.
about?
No.
Just the center, just that southern piece right
The
there.
north side of Center Street between Charles and St. Paul.
The north side. I thought it was this side. I thought that had already been done.
We have, on the, facing the south square, we have one side that's complete.
We're proposing that nothing facing any square gets done under this concept of conversation.
Not even to match the
at
opposite
this
side that's
time.
already been done.
No.
I mean,
Okay.
It fails, I mean, that fails under the same argument that you wouldn't do the north or south side of the square, of the west square. I mean, it's the same issue. If you take the position that it's building face to building face in every part of the square, then you shouldn't do that at this point. You may
Okay.
end up doing it, I mean, we've all understood that, but it should be done comprehensive.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Murphy. All right, any further discussion? Do I sense consensus on this issue? Yeah, Philip's left.
Do we have the form?
Yes, we do. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you,
Thank you.
transportation. Thank you, public. Our meeting is adjourned, 6:20.